world and on TV. Today's topic is going to be what you can do that your church can't, your local church can't. And I don't know about you, but I can tell you about me. When I look around at this nation, I'm concerned. It used to be it was like this downhill slide. Now it seems to me that things are in total free fall, and they're going downhill. Now, if you're comfortable with how things are going in the world around us, you can just hit the off button, because this is probably not going to be relevant to you. But if you are like me and you feel a great sense of urgency that things need to change, we need to see some transformation because things are going the wrong way. If you're like me, then stay tuned, because I think we have some answers here. What we want to start with is what you can do that your church can't. Now, I've heard this for years. Maybe you've said it. Maybe I even said this myself at times. But I've heard for years things like, well, the church is not doing what it should be doing, and that's why we have such a mess going on. And generally the idea is the church, meaning the local church on this street corner or that street corner, is somehow responsible for everything going on around us. Well, I got news for you and me. That is, they are not going to do it. It's an irony here. They can't do it. Why? Because there are things that they can't do that only you can do and only I can do. And we're going to explore those things. I don't want to be too dry, but I think it is important for us to get to a little bit of a technical understanding of how things work, so we can understand why they can't do it and why really the onus is on you and it's on me. I want to take a look at two approaches, and these are approaches to getting things done. We all want transformation. We want to see our lives, our families, our neighborhoods, our communities, and our nation improve. So in that regard, I think the people who are watching, we're agreed. We want to see transformation. But how do we get from here to there? Well, there are two approaches. And I want to be clear right from the start. I'm not talking about either or. I'm talking about both and. One approach is a functional approach. Now, a lot of people don't understand the difference. So a functional approach, stick in your head, think family, think marriage. We'll unpack this in a minute. The second is an administrative approach. Now, the thing is, we all understand about administration. Most of us have worked at a job somewhere, or our spouse has worked at a job, or our father or mother. We know that there's a boss, there's an organizational structure, there are workers, there are roles, responsibilities. We understand administration and how that works. But we want to understand the difference between the functional approach and the administrative approach. It is important, because if we don't understand that difference, we won't understand our role in making the transformation happen that needs to happen in our homes and in our communities and in our nation. So let's take a look at these two different approaches. We're going to first of all take a look at the natural, because I think the thing that is least understood is the functional approach. That's why we hear people say, and maybe we've even said it ourselves, they need to do something about the problem. Let's look at the functional approach, and what we're going to do is we're going to look at the natural, then we're going to understand how the natural mimics the spiritual. Okay, in a functional approach, we're going to take as our example the family. Now, how things come together in a functional approach is this. People understand their roles and they fulfill their roles. And in a family, what do we have? We have two people. And this is God's design. A man and a woman, they meet each other, they fall in love, and they decide to get married. There we have started the family. We have a marriage that has occurred. And from that marriage, as they love each other, we have children emerge, okay? Now, we have 4 roles here that we've identified. We've identified a husband, a wife, a child, and parents. And then there's the mother's role and the father's role. So we're even beyond 4. We're now here, what, at 5 or 6 different roles. Notice these roles and the authority and responsibility to live out these roles were not given to us, say, by the family society. There's no government kind of institution that has defined what the family is. We know what the family is because we live this out in our society, and societies for the last umpteen thousand years have lived out what a family is, and we understand what the role is. You get your responsibility to act in your role because you take that role. I get the responsibility of being a mother because I have a child. And that's what we mean by function. We do the job, the function, because we're actually acting in that role. Now, to the degree that we understand what we're supposed to do, you might say the standards that we're supposed to live by, and actually live them out, to that degree we're happy. Now, you have heard, I've heard of people, they get married and then they have conflict in their roles. Maybe the husband thought he was going to be the one staying home taking the children, and the wife was going to go out and get the job. Or maybe the wife thought she was going to stay home and take care of the children, the husband was going to provide for her, and he said, wait a second, this is you and me, baby, and we both need to pitch in here. So to the extent that we agree on our role and live out our roles with shared standards, to that extent we're happy. And of course, then we always have the case where people have a role that they've agreed to, but then somehow they just don't get around to doing it. That can cause problems too. But this is the key component that goes into making functional approaches work. It is that we understand what we should do, and we should do it. Now, God designed the family for a very important thing. He designed it so that we could have godly children. And once sin entered the picture with Adam and Eve, and death became a part of our reality, if it wasn't for children, we wouldn't be here. Now, we are using the family because the family is an example of the spiritual. And, of course, the spiritual in this regard really mimics the family. God's first command to Adam and Eve, one of his very first commands, be fruitful and multiply. You know what? This was Jesus' last command to us. He said, be fruitful and multiply. This is about making disciples. And guess what, folks? If we don't get it right in the minutia, in how to live out making disciplined followers in people's individual lives, we cannot solve the problems that we're seeing in families with divorce and the children losing role models, being involved in drugs and promiscuity and all that kind of thing. And if we can't solve it at the family level, guess what? We won't be able to solve it in our neighborhood level. We can't solve it in our community level, and ultimately we can look around and see disaster unfolding in our entire nation because we're not getting it right at the minutia. Guess what? That's your responsibility, and that's my responsibility. We're going to take a look at that and what that actually means. So, we do this, I like to think in terms of 3 core processes that need to happen for transformation to happen. We all want to see transformation. It starts with information, demonstration, and then we go on to transformation. And we want to take a look at how this applies to the Great Commandment. Jesus said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. Surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Okay, now, when we're looking at authority, authority is always delegated. Somebody, I could come up to you and say, would you paint this line on the road? I might not have any authority, and you better not pick up that bucket of paint and start painting a line on the road, or else we'll both be in trouble. Because why? I have to have authority to ask somebody to do something. And similarly, who has the authority? We know that Jesus has it because he said all authority was given to him. Now, who gives it? Jesus. And who does he give it to? He gives it to you and to me. And what is that authority? Well, the memo addressed to you and me says, go make disciples of all nations. You and I are, as believers, have this responsibility. And guess what? There's no room in this responsibility to say, hey, I gave $50 to my local church. It is now their job to make disciples. No, 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 no. It doesn't work that way. We're not let off the hook by giving over our responsibility to someone else. He gave it, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, gave the responsibility to you, and he gave it to me. So, now think of it this way. Jesus used this parable of talents, and really the talents were money, and he gave talents to people, and he came back to see how how they did with those talents. So similarly, Jesus has given us talents that we can use to make disciples. He is not going to be happy if he comes back and we say, well, I gave my talents over to the local church. I thought that was their job. Nope, doesn't work that way. He's going to come back and say to you and to me, how did we do? And if our answer is not good, and I would submit to you that right now, because we don't understand our functional responsibility, we are not doing it, and that is the reason we look out and we see really chaos and unfolding in the nation around us. So remember, though, this is both and. It is both the administrative approach and responsibility that exists in the local churches, and it is the functional responsibility that you and I as individuals carry. So I'm not saying an either or. It is both and. Now, we just talked about the functional approach. I want to talk a little bit about the administrative approach because I want us to get clear in our head that it is not either or, it is both and what the strengths are of that administrative approach. When we formally organize, we can do things that we can't do otherwise very effectively. We enable to provide people the opportunity to engage and provide various kinds of services to people. We organize all different kind of ways, from local churches to national ministries. People organize to provide books and training. They organize in social ways to provide anything from food ministries to housing ministries to clothing ministries. All types of things occur in different ways that people organize. Without organizing, it would be very difficult to provide two key ministries that happen through our local churches. That's the ministry of the Word and the ministry of worship. It is a wonderful thing, and we can, in any city, almost any city, on any Sunday morning, we can find a local church that provides an excellent service, an inspiring teaching. We can hear things that will help equip us and help us to understand what Christ is about, what the kingdom is about, and what we're supposed to be about. So we also congregate for things like youth ministry. So there are a lot of things that we do when we organize that are vital, and if we don't organize, we won't be able to do those very well. And of course, the key thing in organization is to create formal roles, formal responsibilities, and as if everybody carries out their part of the program, so to speak, then the whole is able to make progress in achieving its goals and its ends. What we want to do is go beyond that and look at our core activities that we started with. Information, demonstration, and transformation. Now, if we go down the path of organizing and think that that's it, we can actually start understanding making disciples in terms of only knowing and not in terms of being. And so we want to test the organizational model with these three core activities: information, demonstration, and transformation. Can an organization provide information? Certainly. Actually, that's what they're best in doing, is providing information. However, let's move beyond that to demonstration. Well, if we get the information with a little case study or a story embedded in it, that gives us a little idea of how it looks like lived out. You know, the information or the teaching we're getting, what it looks like when it's being lived out. But really, demonstration goes beyond that. Demonstration is what you can do and I can do that the local church cannot do. Why? Because demonstration has to occur in the context of real life. In other words, if I am going to live out the 7 really key things that I have to live out to fulfill my responsibility in the kingdom, I have to demonstrate that because I have to live it out. And if I'm going to make a disciple who is living that out, they have to see me demonstrate that in my life. Now let's just run down what that looks like. 1, loving God. You know, loving God is a moment-by-moment decision. It's one thing to say I love God, but if I am not in a moment-by-moment way making a decision on how I'm going to live my life, maybe I love God, maybe I don't. Jesus said, the people that do his will, those are the people who love him. If I am living that out in my life, the only way I can demonstrate it to you is if you're close enough to see my life, okay? Now, in the context of an organization, you can't see it. You have to see that in the context of day-to-day life. Okay, let's take loving my neighbor. You know what? We all have neighbors. They're all around us. And our neighbors have needs. Now, I can be like the religious of Jesus' day, all caught up in just doing the things that I want to do. Maybe I have spiritual responsibility and I'm caught up in doing those. And I'm so caught up in all these things that I am not loving my neighbor. And when I see needs, I just kind of cross the road like the people who pass the Good Samaritan, and I keep going down the path to do what I want to do. Loving my neighbor is a day-to-day, moment-to-moment thing. I have to be living it in my life. And if I am going to make a disciple, again, I have to be spending enough time with people. They have to be close enough to me to see how I am loving my neighbor. So first it starts with me being a disciple. Then it rolls into me being close enough to someone else that they can see it. Okay? Making disciples. You know what? Jesus, he could have sat up in heaven and sent us down this perfect video series on how to make disciples. He could have saved himself a lot of hard days walking on dusty roads with 12 disciples. You know, we have it pretty good in our civilization. We have electric lights, we have heat, we have that kind of stuff. Jesus didn't have any of those. He didn't have electric lights. He didn't have gas furnaces. He just had dusty roads and a very primitive culture. Well, he could have avoided all of that discomfort and just sent out some videos from heaven. But he didn't do that. He chose to come and walk on dusty roads with 12 people, and then with more. Then there were 70, and then there were 120, actually pouring his life into those people. And I would submit to you that when he said, go make disciples, he was actually talking about us doing exactly what he demonstrated, living our lives with and before each other. Now, that didn't mean that Jesus didn't have the ministry of the word. He certainly did. There were times when he spoke to multitudes and multitudes of people. So it is not either or, but it is both and. And we can't assume that the organizational approach is all we need. We must take on the responsibility of making disciples as individuals ourselves, whatever it takes. Okay, so if we start characterizing making disciples as knowing instead of doing, sort of looks like this. We're going to use the natural. Imagine we have a class for our kids on how to wash dishes. We have a movie, and in the movie we show that we need hot water. We have them memorize the best temperature for the water. And then we show them a glass that looks clean and it's not really clean, and we do that magical zoom in and we can see all that debris that's on the glass that you can't hardly see with your naked eye, and they can't believe it. So we go down through this and we actually give them a test on how to do dishes, and then they pass the test, they get great grades, and we have them train their friends in the neighborhood on how to do dishes. Guess what? We could produce expert dishwashers who have never touched a dish. And to some extent, that's what we're doing in the way that we frame making disciples only through our local churches and not through our day-to-day lives. Now, you might say, this is ridiculous. And it is ridiculous. But guess what? We are doing the ridiculous. So let's run down through there. If we do it that way, will we have information? Yes. Will we have demonstration if we only do it through the local church? Will we have information? Yes. Will we have demonstration? No. Will we have transformation? No. I would submit to you, it is this small change that has created this huge trajectory in the United States. We don't see transformation for good. Actually, we do see transformation. We're seeing our nation transformed. From when I was a young person, there was a real goodness about the United States. Now I would submit to you, not so much. Now I would submit to you that things are on a downhill slide, and if you don't, and if I don't take personal responsibility to live a different way, it is going to continue the way it's going, and it is not going good. It's not going well for families, it's not going well for couples, and it's not going well for communities. Okay, so let's talk about the functional approach. And what is the hallmark of doing things in a functional way? Again, we're going to use the family, because after all, we are supposed to be the family of God. There's a very close linkage between the natural family and the spiritual family. Here's the thing about raising kids. Anybody who has brought a baby home from the hospital knows right out of the gate, it's messy. You don't know when that baby is going to need to be fed. You don't know when they're going to need their diaper changed. They spit up. It is messy, and it is unpredictable. Guess what? That is mimicked in the natural, in the spiritual as well. One of the reasons that I think we want to give over our responsibility to the institution is it's so much neater. We can plan our schedules. We'll know that we are going to be over there maybe 11 to 12 on Sunday morning, or maybe if we're really, really spiritual, it'll be 9 to 12 on Sunday mornings. And then maybe if we're even a step beyond that, maybe we'll even add a care group, and that's going to be from 7 to 9 on Wednesday night. So we have that nicely blocked out. We can check off on our box that we were serving Christ by being in church. Guess what? If we're going to be serving Christ by making disciples in our day-to-day life, it's going to be entirely messy. And we have this common mindset. All I need to do is my responsibility, if I'm going to assign it over to the institution, to the organization, my responsibility simply becomes, I'm going to take someone to church. That's where they're going to get saved. That's where they're going to learn how to follow Christ. And my responsibility is really limited to somehow coaxing, encouraging, or maybe even taking them over there. No, that's not it, folks. The responsibility might include taking them so that they can experience the ministry of the word and the ministry of worship, which are vital, but it only starts there. Then it goes on in that we live our lives together in a connected way. This is what the scripture actually calls koinonia. We translate that word fellowship, but the biblical word is koinonia. You know, if you think about it, we don't use the word fellowship too much in our day-to-day context. I mean, I don't use it. It's not part of my language. And I certainly don't use the word koinonia because it is a foreign word. But the word koinonia means that we have a committed relationship. And here's what God intended. He intended that we have committed relationships with other people, not just committed me to the other person. You know, I'm committed to my husband. But what Christ intends is that these koinonia relationships include him in the center. So it's not just me and my husband, but it's me, my husband, and Christ. And Christ is the glue that on many occasions has held my husband and I together. We've had, like many of you, problems in our marriage. And without Christ there being the glue to hold our marriage together, guess what? We wouldn't have been married. I wouldn't stand here as a married woman. And this is the glue that we need to hold all of our relationships together, because people disappoint us. Ultimately, most people disappoint us. And if Christ is not the center of our relationship, that glue holding our relationship together, guess what? When people just disappoint us, they go their way, I go my way, and the relationship is over. This is what koinonia, fellowship, is all about. It is a three-stranded cord. Let's move on. If I can get my computer to cooperate, we'll move on. I think I've given you a pretty good view of what the functional approach looks like. And I want to now change gears, want to shift, and I want to talk about the administrative approach and what that looks like. Because, folks, like I said, it's not either or. So I hope you enjoyed that first part. We're moving on to part two. Okay, so functional is taking on our functions, our roles and responsibilities, and doing those intentionally with shared standards where we know what we're supposed to do. The administrative approach is way more complex. It involves creating an organization, and an organization should have a purpose for existing. Unfortunately, and I would challenge many of you in your local church, a lot of local churches are not really sure why they exist. That needs to be clear. You need to know, I need to know in my local church context, why are we here, so we can prioritize what is most important, what's second important, make sure we do the most important things. So an organization comes together, it has a mission. That mission is clear, and in order to fulfill the mission, we create different roles and we assign responsibilities to that. We employ good administration to make sure that those responsibilities are carried out. Why are organizations really important? Why are they vital? Where there are many needs that we cannot fulfill unless we organize. We've talked about the ministry of the word in the ministry of worship. We cannot really fulfill these very well unless there is an organized approach to do this. Formal instruction lends itself very well to organized activities. And then let's go beyond that. Let's go into our social needs. You know, the very first time they organized in Acts was to meet a social need. They were distributing food, and the food was not being distributed fairly to all the people who needed it. So therefore, they formed the very first organization, that very first food ministry, to get that food distributed properly. We can't fulfill our social needs in taking care of each other if we don't organize. Then next, civic needs. You know, in Corinthians, Paul said, why do you take your issues before unbelievers? And you know what? He could ask the same thing today. Christians are still taking their issues before unbelievers. Why? Because we haven't organized for the purpose of making peace. We just, I think of all the things that we do poorly in the organized local church. One of the things that we do least well is solve issues of conflict. And we ought to be organizing for that purpose. You might call that a civic responsibility. And then market needs. Now, actually, market needs are addressed by believers all the time. You hear believers all the time starting businesses and different market initiatives. And, of course, believers are all the time engaged in the market, either as consumers or as providers. But you know what? At that level, we don't usually have a very clear understanding of what it means to make disciples in the marketplace, what it means to be disciples in the marketplace. And I'm going to put in a plug for my husband. He has a video on making disciples in the marketplace. You should listen to that. There are whole dimensions in the market that the marketplace activity needs organization, it needs administration, and it again is a place that we should be disciples and be making disciples. But we don't know a lot about that. Why? Because it is fundamentally different than when we meet together at our local churches. And so our local churches cannot teach us in that context how to make and be disciples in the marketplace. So it is very important that we learn all of these different dimensions, because we have, all of us have responsibility in all these different dimensions. If you think about it, we actually have it a bit backwards. We organize, as I've heard people say, I've talked to different pastors, I'll say, what's the purpose of your church? They'll say, our church is to make disciples. Guess what? We organize to make disciples. We've already gone down the three key approaches, information, demonstration, and transformation. Only 1/3 of that can be done very well in an organized situation. So we organize to do and think that's our primary goal. And really we need to be equipping people to live out making disciples in their day-to-day life. But then there are other things that it is really vital to organize to do, like addressing the social needs, like they did in Acts. It said that there was not a needy person among them. Why? Because they got resources in, they organized to distribute those resources out to the people, and they were successful. There was not a needy person among them. So the things that we really do need to organize for, we often don't, because we don't see that maybe as our responsibility to take care of the social needs of the members of our spiritual community. Folks, we need to think about it. We got things, there's an irony here. Things are a little bit backwards. So let's talk about, I think we've covered why it is vital to have both. It is vital to have organization. There need to be taken care of there. It's vital to have the functional. And I'd like to go down and talk about some of the reasons that we don't have the functional. There are reasons. I already said one of them is that it's difficult. When I take on my responsibility to make disciples of people around me, and they take it on as their responsibility to help me be a disciplined follower of Christ, suddenly things get messy. So that's one reason. But there are other reasons as well, and I'd like to do a rundown of those. I think the first challenge is time. We live in probably the busiest culture that has ever existed. We all feel smushed against the deadline, smushed against expectations. And now I'm talking about something that sounds really big, very life invasive, and we stop and we say, well, I don't have time for that. Well, I guess we need to stop and think, what is time? Time is the one resource that when we spend it, we can't get it can't get it back. You know, if I spend $5 in a way that I wasted it, it's not so good, but you know what? I can get another $5. If I spend my time in a way that I waste my time, it's over with. I can't get it back. There is no more time to get back. So time is the ultimate valuable thing that we have. It is the only resource that is an absolute limited supply, and when it's gone, it is all gone. So Jesus was very clear on the things that we have that are of value. He said we can either consume them for ourselves or we can give them to him. There's nothing more important that we need to give to Christ than our time, and giving our time to Christ gives him our life and gives him the ability to help us prioritize our life according to the things that he sees our priority. Making disciples was the last thing that he told us to do. So I would submit to you, if you don't have time to do this, and I don't have time to do this, which I don't and which you don't, we need to do something. We need to change how we're spending time. With the amount of time that we're spending watching TV, being on the internet, and doing other things, we need to reduce that time so we can increase the time that we spend with other people making disciples. This isn't just a good idea, folks. This is vital. This ties into the changing of our entire nation, and it starts with you and me and how we spend that one resource, the one resource, time. Okay, then we move down to time to another thing, fear. A lot of people are afraid. They say, well, I can't make disciples because I don't know enough. Well, here's the amazing thing, how God has made the body. He has given each one of us unique things that we contribute. You have unique things, I have unique things, and when we get together and we contribute to each other, suddenly it's like a giant puzzle coming together. We have to be deliberate, and we have to trust, in spite of that fear, which I have at times and you have, that I just don't have enough. We have to trust that Christ has given us the gifts that we need to function together, and what we need to do is just come together. Okay, moving down, lack of trust. You know what? If I start getting close to people, that requires maybe that I lower some walls. You know, we put up walls in our lives to keep us safe, and a lot of times we have been hurt, and so that's why we've learned that we really need walls. And so that fear comes in. Guess what? We can't walk in both fear and faith. These are opposite ends of the spectrum. If we are going to walk in faith, we need to put that fear aside, and sometimes it needs to be an intentional, I know what I'm afraid of. I know really I have every reason to be afraid because that person is probably going to disappoint me. And guess what? The truth is I am probably going to disappoint that person too. So I have to, by a deliberate decision, put that fear aside and walk closely with other people. Got to do it. Why? Not because I want to necessarily, but because Jesus wants me to do it, and he will be right there walking with us, helping us to get through those hurdles in our relationship. And even if worse came to worse and the relationship doesn't go where I'd like it to, he will help me to get through that, and he will help the other person to get through that too. So we can walk forward in full faith because it's not just me and that other person. It is me and Christ in that other person. It is, I think one of the big challenges, another one, is we don't understand why we're coming together. You know what? We all want friends. And that's just part of the way we're wired as human beings. We want friends, we want family, we want a sense of family and community with other people. But we're often not very deliberate in making a distinction between a friendship and a situation where we're actually helping each other to grow in Christ. And it's not hard. What we need to do is we need to talk about it. We need to say, this is what I would like to see us get out of our relationship. I would like to see you help me grow in Christ. And I would like you to be receptive so that if I see something, I can help you grow in Christ. You know, that little bit of communication provides ultimate clarification of why we're coming together, and it's really important. It is vital not to just be casual about things, but to be more deliberate and say, this is what I want. Even with our family, in our extended family, you know what? We can be, as believers, almost like a natural, even almost godless family because we don't intentionally invite Christ to be part of our family connections. When is the last time you said to your brother or your sister, aunt or your uncle, your mom or your dad or your children, I want Christ to be in the center of our life. I want to help you grow not only as a person, I want to help you grow in Christ. And I want to receive from you not only as a person, but how you can help me grow in Christ. When is the last time we were deliberate and said that? For some of us, probably never. It's a challenge. It is an opportunity. We need to take that opportunity. And then I would say last but not least, the primary reason that we don't do this is because of lack of examples. When we give over to an institution, even a local church, that it is their responsibility to make disciples, guess what? Then we look to them for all of our examples. This isn't the way it should be. We've got to understand that the local church is there to provide the ministry of the word and the ministry of worship. We have pastors and church leaders that will do that. But when I live my life on a day-to-day basis, they're probably not going to be standing there beside me. Who is going to be standing there beside me are the people in my family, my extended family, my neighborhood, my community, my work environment. And in those environments, we need to be looking for disciples, for examples of people who are living as disciplined Christ followers and say, that's what it looks like. That's what it needs. That's what I need to be doing. We ought not to be thinking in terms, and I'm sure none of you are doing this, right? We should not be thinking in terms of, well, they go to that church and they're this kind of Christian, and I go to this church and I'm this kind of Christian. You know, these imaginary walls that we put up, Jesus is not happy with those. He wants us to be one. And being one means reaching out, touching other people, joining hands, and building the kingdom together. We like to think of this concept of assembly together as something that happens on Sunday morning. But I would submit to you that assembling together is something that happens whenever we're with other Christians. We're either assembling with Christ in the middle or we're not. So I would say that is the primary hurdle in our path, is good examples. And I think if we open our eyes and look around, we'll actually see them. And then if we live it out, we will become them. So folks, there you have it. Jesus left this incredible challenge for us. It is called the Great Commission. It is calling us to make disciples of all nations. And that word nation means people groups. And the people groups are around us. They're all around us. And it is your responsibility, and it is my responsibility, to make these disciples of all nations. The question is, will we do it? And if we will, the reward is transformation, not in our own lives, but also in the lives of the people that we love and the people that we're connected to. Also, transformation in our community, and ultimately transformation in our nation. And folks, we're in a desperate hour. We need it. Let's decide in our hearts and minds that we will say yes to Jesus. I will make disciples.